right, let's get going. Happy Friday, everybody. Looks like we are getting a lot of attendance for this. So more and more attendees by the second. So thank you guys for joining us. We've got a pretty interesting and exciting chat today on OASIS Plus. I guess given so how much money has been running through OASIS and OASIS Small Business Pool 1 that many of you, especially the marketing communications audience, has seen, a lot of questions are coming on sort of like what is OASIS Plus and where does marketing communications fit into OASIS Plus? So that is hopefully what we're going to be talking about today for the next give or take 30 minutes, and then we'll do a live 30-minute Q&A to answer specific questions and go from there. So real quick, by way of introductions, I'm Mike Kaptanovich, founder of GrowthLab. Basically 20 years in the marketing communications arena, had a digital agency, sold said digital agency to the largest independent ad agency here in the DC Metro, ran that for a few years, jumped out in 2019 to start GrowthLab and working with companies on both state and federal public sector business development, specifically the marketing communications arena. So going through the attendee list, a lot of friendly faces and close friends. So thank you all for joining. So real quick, for those that aren't familiar with GrowthLab, GrowthLab is exclusively working with marketing communications companies on all things public sector business development, state and federal. That includes pipeline development, go-to-market strategy, capture, teaming, market intelligence, competitive intelligence, etc. So next slide, Marina. There we go. The other thing that we do quite a bit is sizing out graduation strategies. So think of 8A companies graduating, mentor protege consulting, and then sort of, as I've shared through my own personal experiences of M&A, doing quite a bit of buy-side and sell-side M&A advisory. So really excited about this conversation, really excited about introducing everybody to my friend Marina here. Marina is a close industry contact that I've had the pleasure of working with countless times on countless bids of just continuing to strengthen client proposals and increase P-wins. She's got a wealth of experience and has helped many clients and many companies earn their spots on very similar GWACs such as OASIS Plus. So Marina, you want to say hello and let's kick off?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Great introduction, and thank you for inviting me today. I appreciate that. And as Mike has mentioned, Mike and I have been working together for quite a while now. And I want to say that our individual companies bring very complementary capabilities. So while Mike is more sort of like the upfront leader, business development, identifying opportunities, helping clients grow at a bigger scale, more strategic scale, my company does more tactical stuff, the closing of the deal, proposal support, and we do a lot of these GWACs similar to OASIS. There are a lot of others that we have supported a lot of clients in. I have been personally in business development and proposal industry for many years. And I also do various presentations. I'm part of the APMP organization. I do a lot of their conference. I've spoken at a lot of FC events. I've done a lot of these webinars. So it's my pleasure to speak with Mike today in front of you all. I will say that I have my own company, Smart BD Consulting. We have over 80 federal government contracting clients and over 20 billion in client wins in the past over 10 years that we've been around. And we've had some very large single award wins around $2 billion and such. I will say my client base is a little bit broader than Mike's. I know some of my clients are here today as well. Mike specializes in marketing and communications segment. And so today's conversation will be about OASIS, and we'll start a little bit generic about OASIS, but we will focus specifically on the domain applicable to marketing companies. So I did want to kind of make sure we are aware of that. With that said, why should anyone consider bidding on OASIS Plus? Well, first and foremost, it is a pretty hefty contract. It is valued at potentially $130+ billion with a B, and it does have a fairly long period of performance of over 10 years. It is a scorecard RFP and proposal. And so what that means is they give you an Excel spreadsheet that is essentially a scorecard. And for every response, you earn a score. And these types of proposals are different from what I call solution-based proposals, where you have to actually respond in a detailed narrative or provide a solution or capabilities or do a lot of write-ups, right? This is not, there's some write-ups, but it's not a lot of write-ups. There are a lot of similar recent examples that are very similar proposals that some of you may have already worked, and they were CIO SP4, Polaris, Alliant, Department of State, Evolve, CBP-SB is a very recent one that just went in, the AT4 NG2 that I think is going in any day. If it hasn't gone in yet, it's really recent. So there are a whole lot of these types of RFPs that are coming out that are more and more prevalent. There are scorecard types of RFPs. So the cool thing about OASIS Plus, and sort of a unique thing, is they tell you what the passing grade is. So you get to take the scorecard, score yourself based on it, and if you reach the qualifying threshold point, guess what? You won. So then the trick becomes in proving to them that you scored yourself accurately and correctly. It does offer, once you win it, it does offer broad marketing opportunity across federal government. And that includes not only competitive awards, but direct awards. You can get direct awards in targeted procurements under OASIS Plus. For those of you that are joining us that are part of small businesses, if you do grow out of the small business by standard, or if you're 8A and you graduate from 8A program, this may give you a little bit more runway. You may be grandfathered under this for a couple of more years, assuming there is no recertification requirements on specific at the task order level, and it's a maybe. It depends on the task order. And finally, if, again, mostly for small businesses, if you are planning an exit strategy, if you're planning to sell your business, having a GWAC vehicle is very attractive to buyers. And then some companies even just look to purchase, to kind of split off and purchase that vehicle on its own. So that is something also to kind of keep in mind. So those are all some really great reasons, compelling reasons, at least in my book, why you should seriously consider bidding on OASIS Plus. So really quick, some highlights, overall highlights on OASIS Plus. The timeline, the first draft RFP was released November 15th in 2022. And the government really collected a lot of questions. I think there were, I can't remember, we were close to 2,000 or 1,200 questions collected. So they spent a long time getting through those and addressing the answers and drafting the second draft, which subsequently came out on March 6th. And the final RFP is currently expected end of April, beginning of May. It's an estimate. That estimate has been put out there before and moved. I'll just say that. Hopefully this is their final estimate. So in other words, it's really any day now. Any day now, we may be getting a final RFP. And they did say, the GSA said that they will give us 90 days to respond on the final RFP. So that's the timeline that we're looking at. It is going to be a multi-award IDIQ GWAC. So there is no limitation on the number of awards. And there are multiple pools set up for it. So there's an unrestricted pool that's for large business, for any type of businesses, really. There's a small business pool. There's a woman-owned small business pool, an 8A pool, a service-disabled veteran-owned small business pool, and a hub zone pool. So those are all the different pools. I mentioned before, period of performance is 10 years. So the minimum guaranteed amount is $2,500, and they do have a minimum contract sales requirement, $250,000 by year end of 5. So if you don't get at least $250,000 in awards and task order awards by year 5, you could lose this vehicle. That's what that means. So currently they're not requiring any pricing submission, not even rates at the contract level. So when the final RFP comes out, you have 90 days to respond. There is no pricing required. All pricing will be submitted at the task order level after you presumably get the award, and the task orders will start coming out. They're also saying that at one point after they make all the initial awards, they will open it for open on-ramping, meaning at one point they're just going to open it up. And those of you who are familiar with GSA schedules, like Schedule 70 or the mass schedule, you can kind of decide to obtain that schedule at any time and sort of can put an application in at any time. So something to consider if you're not quite getting to that points threshold right now, but you may be expecting new work to come in over the next year or two. Don't worry, there's going to be another opportunity for you to get on this vehicle. And they are allowing joint ventures and contracting teaming agreements, CTAs. There is a requirement on the scorecard to get points for company certifications such as ISO and CMMI and such, and certified systems like accounting system, procurement system, DCA and DCMA certified, and also experience and projects. And it could be either in the name of the joint venture or joint venture partner. So again, if you're not scoring enough points on your own, that's an additional opportunity for you to form a joint venture or CTA with another company that has complementary capabilities, so to speak, that will get you additional points on the scorecard to get you across that threshold. All right, so it does have multiple domains. So the task orders will be issued in each of these domains. And essentially, if you decide to go after more than one domain, you can. The domains are management and advisory, technical and engineering, research and development, intelligence services, environmental, facilities, logistics, and each domain has its own NAICS codes and PSC mappings. So the one domain that we will be primarily focused on today going forward is management and advisory, because as we mentioned in the beginning, this is mostly targeted towards, marketing and communication segment, because that's where most of the folks in today's, presentation, they have come from that segment. So that falls within the M&A, management and advisory domain. But there are all these domains. You can choose which domains you want to go after. You can qualify for more than one domain if you choose to put forth more, if you choose to go after it. However, if you're going after a specific set-aside pool, meaning if you recall the set-aside pools from the previous slide, if you're in a small business pool and you want to go after 2 domains, not one, you can only use projects for once per domain per set-aside pool. So you can use it in that particular domain only once, but you can also use it in a different domain once per set-aside pool, if that makes sense. Okay, so we talked about if you have a joint venture or CTA agreement, you can share sort of the responsibility for having company certifications and certified systems and things like that. However, project experience and past performance, you can do a prime subcontractor teaming arrangement, and you can share that across the whole team. You can't share things like corporate systems or clearances. That has to be either the prime or the joint venture, but project experience and past performance could be some prime, some subs. Okay, so if you do decide to go after this, what are you going to be expected to do in terms of the proposal? How big of a lift it is? What is the current draft RFP asking for? Well, there's a general section, and it's reps and certs, pretty standard, not a big push there. We started talking about qualifying project experience. So you do need to come up with projects, and in the further down slides you will see what that means, what those projects are, what is a qualifying project experience. You do have to have experience in the domain you're going after, and you have to demonstrate that experience, and depending on the attributes of each project and the number of projects, you get certain number of points on the scorecard. They do give you extra points for federal prime contractor experience. I also mentioned they give you points for having certified systems, for having clearances, for those types of things. And they also check past performance, the difference between qualifying project experience and past performance. Project experience is showing them that you have projects, you have done projects, or you're working on projects that have similar scope to the domain you're going after. Past performance is where they see how well you're doing on these projects. Because you may have a project that's very much in line with the domain scope, but you may be getting very low scores for that project. And that's going to be a non-starter, right? Depending on how low the scores are. It's either a non-starter or you don't get the extra points. And finally, there is a responsibility section in the RFP, and it requires professional employee compensation plan, uncompensated overtime policy, financial resources, and cybersecurity and suppliers chain management plan. So those are all the different things that are required by the draft, by the second draft RFP as part of the proposal contents. Now, we do not expect these to change greatly in the final RFP, and that kind of gives you an idea of, if you want to go after it, what kind of a proposal effort are you looking at? And we said no pricing is required. Okay, so you heard me say words qualifying project a few times now. So I thought it would be a good idea to make sure, I know there's a mixture of folks here on the webinar who may not have seen the RFP. So what is a qualifying project as the RFP defines it? So it could be a single contract, it could be a prime contract, it could be a subcontract, or it could be a commercial contract. It could be a single task order under like an IDIQ, or under a BPA, or under a BOA, or under an FSS contract. Or it could be a collection of multiple task orders under all these vehicles as well. So all of those things could be a qualifying project. Each qualifying project must meet or exceed an average annual value. That value is not a single number. That value is based on the domain and on the pool that you're going after. So specifically, again, we said that this presentation will be more targeted towards the M&A domain. So for the M&A domain, the minimum annual values are $500,000 for small business pools and $1 million for unrestricted pools. And again, that's an average annual value. It's not the overall contract value. Each project must be either ongoing, or it must be complete within 5 years of the final RFP issuance date. And finally, you cannot have a completely negative record of past performance. So they give an example. If past performance is being judged on the point scale of 5, you cannot have average scores below 3. That's the RFP's rule. Okay. So that's what a qualifying project is. All right, so with that said, I'll turn it over to Mike for a couple of slides to talk a little bit about how marketing communications fit in.
Yeah, thanks, Marina. So hopefully that was helpful on sort of the background on OASIS Plus, what it is, timeline, sort of what's in scope and what's out of scope. So going back to sort of my opening remarks, the question that I'm asked most often these days is, well, where does marketing and advertising fit in? I'm a PR firm, I'm an ad agency, I'm whatever I am. Where does that all fit in? Because I keep on hearing that that's phase 2. What does phase 2 mean? Marina is talking about sort of the management pool 1. So how does this all fit in? So there's the short answer to that is it's tricky. Near term in phase 1, phase 1 contains both management and advisory domain, which Marina's talked about, and that includes specifically the NAICS codes 541.611, 612, 613, and 618. Many companies, and knowing many of the attendees on this webinar, many of your awards are in one of these NAICS codes, which is great. So all of your communications contracts under 541.611, as long as they qualify to what Marina just outlined in the previous slide for sort of that qualifying project, suffices. And then as you know, 541.613 is also where a lot of other NAICS code or a lot of contracts are in our marketing communications world. Fantastic. That also qualifies. So that's phase 1. Phase 2, the marketing and public relations domain is anticipated. It is anticipated to come out in phase 2. What that means, I don't know of when that'll be. As we all know from working with the government, that could mean anything. They say that it might be next year. Is it next year? When is it next year? Not exactly sure, but that presumably, and what they have been saying from the very beginning in all these draft RFP docs is that marketing and public relations is going to be a domain. It is going to come out in phase 2. So we could either go near term in phase 1, or we could wait in phase 2, and Marina will cover that in a bit. The other thing to note is that the HCATS IDIQ, where much of the human capital and some recruitment, some change management, some of those types of capabilities will not be getting recompeted. That work is going to be moving to OASIS Plus as well, which that's yet another domain that is anticipated for phase 2. So next slide. So I guess the $1 million question is, obviously I called out 613 and 611 and everything else. Most marketing contracts, if they're not in 613 or 611, they're in 541, 810. So what do we do about all of our work that is that's classified under that NAICS code?
I have to unmute myself, turns out. So if your projects do not map cleanly to one of the NAICS codes that are within phase 1, or if you have commercial work and they don't map to NAICS codes at all, you can still use your projects. All you need to do is provide a proof of what's called relevance. And so what you see on the slide, I'll go over it in a moment, it's what is specified in the current RFP. So this is exactly from the RFP. So proof of relevance could be, as an example, an award form, as long as that award form describes the general scope, nature, complexity, and purpose of the services. And it has to have enough detail to map to the scope under this domain. It could be statement of work, performance work statement, statement of objectives, anything basically that describes, again, a general scope, nature, complexity, purpose of the services. It can be Section B, supplies and services, if it's a federal contract. It could be any other verifiable contractual documents. And some of the examples listed are CDROs, SF30, letters of technical direction, subcontracting plans, approved invoices. Again, as long as these things, contract deliverables, award fee documents, et cetera, as long as these are verifiable contractual documents, and you can determine by looking at them the nature of the work that you're doing on this project, and it maps to the domain scope that you're going after, which in this case, it's the M&A domain that we're specifically focused on. So what you have to do is you have to take these documents and you have to tag specific written passages in this contract documentation from the list above, and that the tagging has to support the relevance document determination. Now, I keep talking about the scope of the domain, and I promise on one of the next two, like this next slide or the slide after, I will show you what that means. So hold that thought, don't ask that question just yet. if the contract documentation alone cannot demonstrate relevance, there is a project verification form that's provided with the RFP, and you have to fill it out and get it signed by the customer. And you have to include a narrative statement clearly explaining the project scope. I think it's up to 750 characters. So this, again, is directly from the RFP. These bullets signify, and I'm not going to read them for sure, but I'm going to leave it up here for a little bit. But this is basically the scope of work that is within the M&A domain, specific to the RFP. So what I highlighted in orange here is the scope that might be relevant to, again, the marketing communication segment of companies of that predominantly are at this presentation. There could be others that are not highlighted. The highlighting is just sort of my own personal kind of guess and guidance. So as you're tagging your contractual documents or describing the work that you do on your project, it has to align to any or all of these bullets that are on the page. So not necessarily just the orange ones. This is just the ones that I thought would be most relevant, right? But you can pick any of these bullets. So the rule of thumb, it could be as many bullets as you see. It could be as few. There's no rule in the RFP that says you have to cover at least 10 or at least half or all of them. Nothing says that currently, right? But you always want to cover as many as you possibly can, right? And at least, I would say a couple for sure, but as many as you possibly can. Because the less bullets you cover, the more risk that the government, when they do review your proposal, the bigger the risk that they will say it's not relevant. And then they'll take points off from your initial point determination.
And real quick point on this is that many of you are probably looking at, okay, where's the ad campaigns? Where's the marketing? Where's the graphic design? Where's some of the content production that, just looking at the attendee list, a lot of you sort of fit into? The short answer is it doesn't, which is sort of where, like what we talked about, or I talked about a few slides ago. It's like you've got the marketing PR domain anticipated. If you go after phase 1, which is sort of what we're talking about, management advisory, it's not exactly one-to-one. So like some of these things, some of you guys are doing change management, some of you guys are doing leadership and organizational assessments. All of you presumably are doing some sort of strategy development or stakeholder requirement, or strategic planning. So it's like you just have to maybe think a little less linear on sort of how to map some of your experiences in the absence of the marketing PR domain, which again, phase 2 and might or might not come out next year.
So thank you, Mike, for that clarification. I appreciate it. All right. So what if it turns out that you try the scorecard and you don't have sufficient score at this point to get you to get you on OASIS Plus? Well, you could team. And again, you could consider both joint venture type teaming or CTAs, as well as the more traditional prime sub relationships. And these are just some of the things. So this is not an all-inclusive list by any means. It's kind of high level, and it's fairly straightforward and obvious. But some of the things that you should consider if you do think about teaming. And so one of the things is, does your potential teammate have complementary project experience to yours based on the checklist requirements? Do they have like proper NAICS codes or NAICS codes that can map? For joint ventures, you may be looking for joint venture members that have complementary corporate systems that have been audited, or corporate certifications, perhaps a clearance, anything that would increase your score, right? So the bottom line is the addition of the teammate and or their projects and past performance ultimately should add to your score. That is your ultimate sort of overarching guidance as to whether or not you should team versus try to go after it yourself. But as you're thinking about those obvious things, you also should be thinking about, will this team be cooperative and helpful during the proposal effort? And this is important, even though you're not writing a whole lot or solutioning a whole lot. They will need to provide contractual documentation. They may need to go back to their clients and get their sign-offs. There's a whole bunch of things you're going to be asking them to do. So you definitely want to make sure They're going to be responsive. They're going to be timely. They're going to get you all the data that you need, and you can rely on them to do that. Now, even though the pricing is not required on, in this initial submission, it ultimately will be required under the task order. So you should always be thinking about, will this TMA be price competitive, right? Again, it's proposed award determined consideration, but you do want to make sure that you can bid on the task orders competitively together, right? And they're not going to actually ultimately drive your price up. So these are some of the things you should definitely consider. And the next couple of slides is the overall analysis of the scorecard. I mentioned that there's a scorecard provided with the RFP, and it's an Excel-based type of scorecard, and it assigns points for everything, right? So basically here, it's a visual representation of that. So starting with a small business set-aside pool, and this is really for all of the small businesses. This is kind of generalized across small business, 8A, SDV, SB, all of those socioeconomic different categories are summarized on this slide, other than unrestricted. So this is everybody other than unrestricted on this slide. So for minimal average annual values for projects for small businesses and other socioeconomic categories, typical minimum was 500K. For the facilities and environmental domains, it's 250K, and for the R&D domain, it's $1 million. The total possible credits for all of the small business set-asides is 50, and the qualification threshold is 36. So as long as you score 36 or higher, and the government, the GSA, in their evaluation, basically believes and says, yes, they have assigned these points correctly, then you get on OASIS Plus. That's what this means. And then again, if you look at the visual representation, the blue, the biggest lines are qualifying projects. So if you look at the qualification threshold, and that's 36, outside of the R&D domain, you can technically get to OASIS Plus without any of this additional requirements, right? You can get to it just with having maximum qualifying, getting all the maximum points or close to the maximum points on the qualifying project alone. The stuff in orange is federal contracts and multiple award environment contracts. The stuff in gray is past performance. Again, that's how well that you're doing on your projects. And finally, the stuff in orange is company clearances, certifications, and corporate systems, having them like audited and approved. So you see that the split up is different for domain, and it logically makes sense. So if you look at the R&D domain, research and development, the government is a lot more interested in having proven concepts in the federal contract arena rather than the commercial arena. And so that's why, for example, the project points credits alone won't get you an OASIS Plus. So looking at the M&A domain, you can certainly get there just within the qualifying projects. Again, you just need to get 36 out of 38, and you should be set. And then you have 5 possible points for having federal contracts, multiple award contracts, and things like that. They're all fall within the federal arena. You have 3 possible points for past performance ratings, and you have 4 possible points for company clearances, certifications, and systems. And then going to the next chart, it's the same type of chart, but only for the unrestricted pool, right? So I will, you can look at the visual representation here while I point out some of the difference in the minimum average annual values. And as to be expected, they're higher. So for qualifying projects under most domains, it's the minimum average annual value is $1 million. The enterprise solution domains, those are very large, like very big, spanning across multiple types of scopes. It's 50 million, and that's an annual minimum value. And then facilities is 500,000, and R&D is 1.25 million. Total possible credits is also 50, similar to a small business pool, but the qualification threshold is higher, and that's at 42. It's set at 42, higher than 36, obviously. And then again, the enterprise domain threshold, they're looking for really large enterprise-wide contracts there. So the points are higher as well. It's 45. And then you can see that unlike the small business pool, there are a lot of domains, including M&A. You can't just get there based on the projects alone, because the minimum qualification threshold is 42, but you can only get up to 35 points on the project. So you have to start getting more points on these remaining areas as well. All right, so I think I'll go over these really quickly. Mike and I both have some service offerings around OASIS Plus. And so one of them is initial preliminary assessment, and that's basically is designed to feed into your bid, no bid, or teaming recommendations. And it's taking sort of like interviewing you, understanding your capabilities as a company, looking at potential projects that you would be using, and coming up with an initial projected score. And obviously that will answer the question of, you know, would you be able to go after it by yourself? And if the score is lower than the minimal qualifying threshold, you know, it's providing some recommendations. Do you team? Do you not team? What else can you do to get your score higher? The next offering that we have is what I call complete external assessment. And that's, you know, if you're already going down the path, you've determined that you do want to go after OASIS Plus, that you'll get the minimum score. You started putting all of the documentation together. You've done a whole package, and you want an external assessment, which is similar to a color review. What would be like a color review in the regular proposal world. And that's what it is at this point. It's reviewing all of the proposal documents. So if you have statement of works that are tagged, if you have write-ups, all of those parts and pieces, reviewing all that and confirming that the initial score that you've assigned yourself is in fact a valid score. And then that assessment includes the final projected score based on all the artifacts that we have reviewed that you have provided to us. And then if you're looking for a full sort of proposal management and proposal development support, somebody to come in and help you do the whole thing soup to nuts, we have that on TNM on times and material basis. And finally, the submission of this proposal is very tricky and very different and very unique as well. It's not just emailing the proposal to an email address or similar. There's actually a tool called Symphony, and that tool has been used for multiple other similar scorecard bids, and it's very complicated. And I will say I personally have not done a Symphony upload, but a lot of the folks that work for me have, and I have heard them speak about it, and I have heard them do demos, and my brain went poof. So it's a very complicated tool, and sometimes you have to upload something, and it creates like a form and spits it back out at you, and then you have to like fill out that form. So it really like is a multi-step process that actually takes hours. So those of you who are not familiar with Symphony, I want to make sure that you take this piece of knowledge away from this conversation, if nothing else. So definitely recommend you have somebody who's familiar with Symphony helping you, and you set aside a lot of time to do that, and you do a lot of that in advance. So that's a very definitely great recommendation. Okay, so those are some of the OASIS Plus offerings that we have. And finally, the final slide, and I'll pause so you guys can all you know, take a picture of it or scan the QR code. This is how y'all can find Mike and I after this if you need help or have questions or would like to hire us for any of the services, or if there's anything else we can do to help. And with that said, I will turn it back over to Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Marina. This is great. Hopefully, this was very helpful for everybody. And as sort of Marina alluded to when we opened up, I think her and I are very complementary of one another. Where I provide a lot of the sort of strategic services, strategy, pipeline capture, teaming, all of that stuff, especially in the marketing communications arena. And Marina is my go-to resource for many live proposals. As many of you know, we don't do too much proposal writing. We sometimes do reviews, we sometimes do proposal management, but oftentimes that's with and through Marina. So she's got an amazing team over there focused on this, and has shepherded a boatload of companies through the schedule and GWAC process as well. So let's take the slides down. We've got some questions in here, so let's just go through. If you've got questions, feel free to type away, and we'll get to as many as we can in the next 20 minutes. So Marina, one person asked, can you be awarded both the woman-owned small business and the small business pool?
Yes, correct. You can go after multiple pools. And yes, absolutely, you can do that. That is something you can do.
And then to qualify for the woman-owned small business pool, does the CTA need to be with 2 woman-owned small businesses? How does the CTA typically work?
So this is not an area of my personal expertise, the joint ventures and CTAs. I will preface my answer with that. But I do believe, maybe, I'm not sure. It either has to be 2 woman-owned small businesses, or the managing partner has to be a woman-owned small business. I'm not exactly sure, to be honest.
It's typically 2 similarly situated entities, so presumably it would need to be 2 woman-owned small businesses.
Yeah.
What other questions do we have? Does it make sense to, I saw this one question coming. Does it make sense to apply for management and advisory in phase 1 and marketing PR in phase 2? How does that work?
Okay, so I'm happy to cover that one. I will say the first question is, would you qualify for phase 1, right? So if you would qualify for phase 1, M&A domain, especially if it's on your own without even teaming, I would certainly highly recommend you go after it, because when they issue task orders, they're going to issue them to different domains and different pools. So the biggest footprint you have across sort of the matrix of domains and pools, and that includes phase 2 with additional domains, right? The more opportunities and access you have to more task orders, right? So the more jobs you're going to be able to bid in the future. So, however, so the question becomes, if you're not quite at the qualifying threshold for phase 1, what do you do? Do you wait for phase 2? Do you try to team to get you through phase 1? And that's where it becomes more of a business decision. But here are some of the considerations. If you get into phase 1, another thing is timing, right? Obviously, they're going to start releasing task orders on the phase 1 domains earlier before phase 2 comes out. So if you wait until phase 2, you're not going to be able to, I mean, it's just the timing of it as well. You're not going to be able to bid on those initial task orders. So, however, if you think that, you know, phase 1 you'd have to team, but phase 2 you can do it on your own, and you want to have it all to yourself for whatever reason, you don't want to share it with teammates, you may want to consider to wait till phase 2. So those are some of the considerations. Ultimately, the decision has to be yours. There's another aspect that feeds into your business decision, and that's cost. And I don't think that bidding on something like a scorecard bid is, in my opinion, as expensive as like what I call a solution type bid, where you have to provide a 100-page proposal and think through solutions and things like that. But it still does have a BNP cost associated with it, whether you do it fully in-house or hire a consulting agency to help you. Either way, it has a cost, right? So obviously that has to feed into your business decision too. So it's kind of a cost benefit analysis that you need to do. Also knowing after, you know, future work and customers that you're going after, will they be likely to, you know, put their business on OASIS Plus or not? I will say a lot more government agencies are going that direction that have never used even OASIS. I will say I personally have a lot of NASA clients and a lot of NASA customers, and historically they haven't used OASIS that much at all. And their big procurement chief across, like for the entire NASA agency, just made a big statement that they're going to be looking at OASIS Plus going forward in a serious way. And that was a very big, very different statement that, you know, we've seen before. So just something for your consideration.
There was a question on, wonder your thoughts on OASIS versus OASIS Plus, or a great deal of OASIS awards, so lots of competition. And I think the short answer to that is yes. I think it's going to be as many awards, if not more, because I think, as Marina sort of alluded to earlier, covered earlier, it's that as long as you hit your minimum point threshold that you get on, versus previous scorecard bids have largely been, hey, we'll take the top X number, versus this is a small business. If you hit your 36 points out of 50, you're automatically on. So presumably the number of awardees is going to be massive. Similar to OASIS, I would actually anticipate that it would be more. I think the other part of that answer, though, and sort of the other consideration on whether or not to bid OASIS Plus Phase 1 or Phase 2 is similar to what we saw on OASIS, where initially, and arguably still, marketing communications was never well represented or well intended from an OASIS standpoint, in that many of the OASIS, especially OASIS Small Business Pool 1 companies, were IT focused. And it was, I remember just a few years ago, for example, when there was less than 3 companies that were a legitimate or credible marketing communications arena. But when OASIS started dabbling in Marcom contracts, it went to one of 2 or 3 companies just because there wasn't anybody else on the vehicle. So over time, over the last few years, more companies have gotten onto that, but still, it's not like there's been a massive exodus of marketing communications contracts on that. But it still is, from a vehicle management standpoint, and as I've said for many, many years, the government continues to streamline acquisition, use multi-award IDIQs, BPAs, GWACs, etc. It's good hygiene or good best practice, in my opinion, to get on some of these vehicles, whether or not the immediate need is there. But as we see, government continues to evolve how they do it. So hopefully that answered that question. Another question here. Let's see. What will happen to existing OASIS contracts? Do you feel that existing OASIS contracts will shift to OASIS Plus? You want to take that one, Marina?
Sure. So I'm guessing you're talking about task orders, existing OASIS task orders. So the ones that are currently active, they're gonna run out, eventually expire. The period of performance will run out, and then depending on the timing, if OASIS Plus is in place by then presumably yes, the recompetes of those will move to OASIS Plus, because that is the GSA's replacement of OASIS. That's the next generation of OASIS. So unless they decide to go some completely different direction for some reason, for whatever reason it may be, so yes, it is a good guess that a lot of the task orders that are like ongoing and keep getting recompeted, the ones that are on OASIS now, will eventually move to OASIS Plus.
What are the scorecard parameters on women-owned small business pool for management advisory domain?
So the scorecard parameters are largely the ones that you saw on that graph slide. It starts out with what I call corporate-wide parameters, and it's facility clearances, certifications, corporate certifications like ISO, CMI, and others. It's audited and approved accounting procurement systems. Then the next set is qualifying projects. And I see another question here that I'll try to answer. There are 5 qualifying projects that are asked for under the qualifying projects. That's max 5. And so the next parameter is past performance, and that's like how well are you performing on the project. And the last one is on your federal, I call it federal government related experience. It's either federal contracts or multiple award contracts, which are also in the federal arena type of bucket. So those are all the different buckets, and they're all, so the buckets are the categories are the same under every domain, every pool. It's the amount of points that they give per each differs, if that makes sense.
Another question, you mentioned phase 2 will be including a marketing PR NAICS code update. Is there an existing NAICS 541, 810, 820, 830 to be determined? Yes, presumably it would include all the above. So more to come on that one.
Yeah, I don't think they've published it yet, so to some degree to be determined, but to Mike's point, likely.
What attachment on the RFP shows us a scorecard, Marina?
Wow. Okay. Well, that will take me a second to pull it up and take a look for the actual.
It's in there. I remember seeing it's one of the Excel files that's in the package.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is. So I'm looking at that right now. It's I believe it's JP-8. I'm double checking it. No, that's the qualification matrix. Yep, it's JP-8. And I have it up on my screen now, so I don't know if you want me to share my screen and flash it to people so they see what it looks like. I don't know if it's helpful or not. Up to you, Mike.
Why don't you just do a quick flash and for everybody to see what it looks like, and then we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, so this is roughly what it looks like. Let me try to make it a little bit bigger. And this is here. Let me do M&A. This is an M&A domain as an example. And this is the small business thing. But if you guys can see across the, can you see my screen, by the way?
Yep.
Okay. So if you can see across the bottom of my screen, there are a bunch of tabs. And so in each tab, the first name is a domain, so M&A domain. And the second after the dash is the pool. So this is SB Small Business Pool. And so then it gives you references to the RFP specific sections. And then it talks about QPs, the qualifying project. And it tells you it summarizes all the requirements, and it tells you maximum number of, I call it credits, I call it points, but the same thing. So everything in blue is the qualifying projects and what they get credit for, and then past performance. And then green is what I was talking about, the competition and multiple award environments and the federal agencies. That's sort of like federal experience. And then orange goes into accounting system approval and the facility clearance. And then yellow is other certifications. And these are like your 3 ISO and 1 CMMI, and you get 1 credit for each. And then on the bottom, there is a summary. You have total 50 credits available, and the qualifying threshold is 36. So, and then each tab has very similar and different numbers of credits assigned. And again, it's split up by domains and pools.
So Marina, one question, given your experience on getting onto these scorecards, et cetera, if you apply for a woman-owned small business pool, would that be a duplicative submission for the small business, or how would it be different?
Yes, it can be. I believe because it's different domain. Well, let me think about that. It depends if it's different domains or the same domains, right? So your projects, for example, so some of the submission will definitely be the same. So for example, your corporate certifications would be the same, right? And things like that. But then when it gets to projects, that's where it gets a little tricky. But I do believe, if I recall correctly, you can use the same projects for this different domains within different pools. So, so yes, that part will be similar or the same, or can be. As long as it's the same domains, sorry. So as long as it's the same domains, right? Okay.
Same domain, you can't use the same experience across multiple domains.
Correct.
Thank you, everybody. We had a really good attendance here, so hopefully this was really, really helpful. We'll be sending out the recording. We'll be sending out the slides. If you haven't gotten Marina's contact information, I put it into chat. Some of you mentioned that the QR codes weren't working, so feel free there. And then I'll also follow up by email to all of the people that attended with both of our contact information. So thank you guys. Hopefully this was really helpful, and have a great weekend. Talk soon. See ya.